President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, condemned the attempted attacks by the Venezuelan far right in complicity with imperialism against diplomatic headquarters in the country. And in the United States, a federal trade court blocked Donald Trump from imposing sweeping tariffs on imports under an emergency powers law. And in Palestine, the Hamas resistance movement announced their approval of the U.S. ceasefire proposal while awaiting the Israeli response. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Stay with us. The President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, condemned the attempted attacks by the Venezuelan far right in complicity with imperialism against diplomatic headquarters in the country. During the inauguration of the tourist route La Lucha of the communal government of Miranda, the President denounced the aggression plans against embassies in Venezuela and candidates to the regional and legislative elections for the Great Patriotic Fall, in an attempt to incite violence during the May 25th elections. In this sense, the head of state highlighted that more than 70 plotters have been captured with evidence of their participation in threats against the country.
Today, Diosdado Cabello held a press conference at noon. If you have not seen it, look for it. It is on YouTube. Diosdado showed 10% of the evidence we have. He showed the handwritten notes of that gentleman, Juan Pablo Guanipa, how he was planning the assassination of the leaders of all the parties of the Great Patriotic Poll, how they were planning the attack to several embassies, among them the Embassy of the United Nations and the Colombian Embassy headquarters, how they were planning attacks to opposition leaders who had registered for the elections on Sunday.
In order to continue the economic growth of Venezuela, international trade with Turkey is boosted with new bilateral agreements and partnerships between both nations. Our colleague Bruno Falsi with more details.
Em la capital venezolana foi inaugurada
Capital, the Venezuela-Turkey Commercial Integration Chamber, was inaugurated in the Venezuelan capital, with the objective of strengthening trade, relations, and exports between the two nations. Well, it has grown a lot. I will give you some figures. 10 years ago our trade was only $150 million. In 2018 to 2022, on two occasions our trade volume exceeded $1 billion. And then our goal, the goal that our President Erdogan and President Maduro have set is to reach $3 billion.
Each businessman has to assume himself as a trade ambassador of the exportable offer of all the wonderful things that the expression made in Venezuela means, because there goes the pride of what is ours associated to a brand, a product, a consumable good or a service, and then they will open spaces for a greater commercial exchange from the chamber, and at the same time they will serve to identify investment opportunities.
Com a presença de empresários de vários sectores
With the presence of businessmen from various sectors from all over the country, a document was signed together with representatives of both governments, thus creating jobs and fostering economic growth. The support we can provide is very vital in order to make this country grow, and despite all the adversities, despite all these unilateral coercive measures that have been imposed on us, we continue to grow. In the business sector there are many experiences where we have been importing some machinery, some medicine and food products from Turkey, as well as some experiences that we from Portuguese are exporting. Country brand made in Venezuela to Turkey.
La propuesta de Cavetur ha sido bien
Cavetur's proposal has been well received by the Venezuelan productive sector, with more than 60 companies being part of the signed agreement.
We have many products such as coffee, passion fruit, potatoes, carrots. We have many products that can add to the productive economy of our country and be able to see what is shown here in our Venezuela to Turkey. The fact that we are part of a chamber of commerce between bilateral agreements is very important for us because it allows us to increase exports and take the products that Venezuela produces to another frontier.
em contexto de guerra econômica de
In a context of economic warfare by the United States against Venezuela, the deepening of relations between these nations strengthens the consolidation of the multipolar world and an alternative to neoliberalism.
Em la Câmara de Marcos da Silva, Bruno Falsi, Caracas, Venezuela, para teleSUR.
Meanwhile, in Argentina, researchers mobilized at the scientific pole in Buenos Aires in rejection of the Javier Milei government's brutal adjustment of the national scientific and technological system. Multiple researchers mobilized in front of the scientific pole to express their rejection to the cuts and the lack of income the National Scientific and Technical Research Council. In this way, they denounced that budget cuts, layoffs, paralysis of funds for laboratories, frozen salaries, and the dismantling of agencies and institutes promoted by the government led to a critical situation for CONICET and the Argentine scientific system as a whole. Now we have our first break coming up. First, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In the United States, a federal trade court on Wednesday blocked Donald Trump from imposing sweeping tariffs on imports under an emergency powers law. The ruling by a three-judge panel of the New York-based International Trade Court follows several lawsuits arguing that Trump had overstepped its authority, left U.S. trade policies subservient to his whims, and unleashed economic chaos. According to reports, the Trump administration has filed an appeal, and White House officials responded to the ruling with public statements questioning the court's authority in the case. On the other hand, financial markets applauded the ruling as the U.S. dollar following the court's order rose against currencies such as the euro, the yen, and the Swiss franc in particular. And on Wednesday, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced the revocation of visas for some Chinese students. The far-right politician claims that these are Chinese students linked to the Communist Party or with studies in sensitive areas. The action adds to many others that have raised uncertainty among over 1 million foreign students. At the same time, the Secretary of State also instructed all U.S. embassies to immediately suspend all student visa applications. Rubio warned that further substantial changes are expected. And on Wednesday, Canadian Ambassador to the United Nations Bob Wright described President Trump's offer for Canada to benefit from the Golden Dome project as mafia extortion. After stating that his country does not accept blackmail or bribes of any kind, Bob said on his social media that in certain contexts, Washington's proposal will be qualified as mafia extortion. The U.S. President announced that he would offer his northern neighbors free membership in the Golden Dome in exchange for Canada agreeing to become the 51st state of the Union. The Golden Dome is a highly contested project which several governments say will contribute to sparking a nuclear war. And in Peru, the health ministry reported Wednesday that pertussis cases soared in the country in 2025. Authorities registered 12 deaths and 650 infections in what is considered the worst pertussis outbreak in the nation's history. Regions with confirmed cases are Loreto, Lima, Cajamarca, Cusco, Arequipa, Callao, and Tacna. In the Loreto region, 9 people have died, mainly in the Datem del Marañón, 1 in metropolitan Lima and 2 in Lambayeque. So far, most of the deaths have occurred in children aged 0 to 4 years. The deceased children did not have the complete vaccination scheme. And in Peru, the second water summit held in Lima ended with guidelines for the correct conservation and management of water to benefit the planet. The roadmap with guidelines applicable at the internal level according to the conditions of each country was described by the ministers of the environment or their equivalents as historic and a solid commitment to the protection of water resources. The document, according to Juan Bello, Regional Director of the United Nations Environment Program, will be presented at 4 international meetings, including the Forum of Environment Ministers and the 7th United Nations Assembly to be held in December this year. And Nicaragua is preparing with the National Interinstitutional Plan, Safe Winter 2025, with the objective of protecting the lives of the population from meteorological phenomena. Genia Doña with the details.
De acuerdo con los reportes meteorológicos,
According to meteorological reports, an active hurricane season is expected, with the possibility of up to 17 events such as tropical storms and hurricanes, some of them with the potential to reach categories 4 and 5. Taking into account the experience of previous years, the country is recognized as being vulnerable both directly and indirectly to these phenomena, so the national authorities have assured that they will remain vigilant and in a constant state of alert.
From the country's point of view, conditions are neutral, but we are going to have a greater probability of cyclones in greater numbers and with greater frequency.
el Sistema Nacional para la Prevención, Mitigación y
The
Atención
National
de
System for Disaster Prevention, Mitigation and Response presented the plan to the National Assembly, highlighting a series of strategic axes that will strengthen institutional and community capacities to respond effectively to any meteorological emergency.
The vital thing is the safeguarding of life, therefore all the protection mechanisms, health care, shelters, food must be ready. That is why these plans also start from each municipality, and it is the next step that we are going to review critical sites municipality by municipality, because it is fundamental.
Sitio crítico por sitio crítico, que es fundamental.
Esta es la red de cauces que hemos construido. Mencionaba que son más de 20 kilómetros, de los cuales ya hemos terminado como 15 kilómetros de cauces.
En contraste con los gobiernos neoliberales, donde
In
solo
contrast to the neoliberal governments, where in Managua alone there were more than 130 critical points highly vulnerable to rains and floods, since 2007 the Sandinista government has directed the execution of multiple works and mitigation projects, significantly reducing these risks.
Evidentemente hemos venido reduciendo los puntos críticos de la
We
ciudad.
have been reducing the critical points of the city of Managua. Every year we have been advancing. The exposed population has also been reducing. Let's remember that it was a city that had 130 critical points, more than 30,000 families living in critical points in Managua, and that has been reducing. At this moment we are locating a little more than 2,000 families of 30,000 that there were, and critical points. We only have 52 of them, that we are still working on.
Todavía tenemos 52 de ellos que tenemos que seguir atendiendo.
como parte del enfoque preventivo, también
As part of the preventive approach, multi-hazard exercises have also been carried out throughout the country to prepare the population on how to act and evacuate in the event of a natural disaster, thus reinforcing a culture of prevention and effective response.
Kenia Doña, Telesur, Nicaragua.
We now have our second short break coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, and I'll be right back with more. Welcome back. In Palestine, the Hamas resistance movement announced that they approved the U.S. ceasefire proposal while awaiting the Israeli response. In an official statement, Hamas stated that the possible agreement contains a permanent ceasefire, the total withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip, the entry of humanitarian aid, and a professional committee to manage the enclave's civil affairs once the formal announcement of the settlement is made official. In this context, the proposal was presented by the United States Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who also assures that the ceasefire could take place in the next few days. On the other hand, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres assured that he is closely following the developments and is in permanent contact with Qatar and all the parties. And in Gaza, Palestinians have strongly rejected the presence of U.S.-backed aid centers, expressing deep mistrust and concern that Washington aims to impose a control mechanism under military oversight. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, supported by the U.S. and Israel and employing armed U.S. security personnel, seeks to bypass the United Nations as the primary aid distributor, requiring Palestinians to undergo identity checks and screenings for alleged Hamas ties to access aid. Many Palestinians have avoided these centers, viewing the initiative as a politicized and militarized effort that undermines humanitarian principles and threatens vulnerable population. And during a United Nations Security Council session in New York on May 28th, the permanent representative of Palestine, Riyad Mansour, broke down in tears while describing the critical humanitarian situation in Gaza. Visibly shocked, Mansour appealed for international aid in response to the tragedy affecting thousands of Palestinian children and families, describing the situation as unbearable for any normal human being. Gaza has been facing a devastating war with Israel for more than a year and a half, and the situation has worsened in recent weeks due to a blockade preventing the entry of food and medicine. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, more than 54,000 people have died. Mansour denounced the indescribable suffering of his people and criticized the world's inaction.
Since Israel broke the ceasefire in March, over 1,300 Palestinian children have been killed, and around 4,000 have been injured. These are children. Children. And still, a war against barbarism. Children. Dozens of children are dying of starvation. The images of mothers embracing their motionless bodies, caressing their hair, talking to them, apologizing to them. This is unbearable. How could anyone tolerate this horror? Excuse me, Mr. President.
Furthermore, Mansour highlighted the double standards of the United Nations, calling out the organization for ignoring the massacre of Palestinians.
Nothing can justify attacking civilians, whether Palestinians or Israelis. Double standards no more. We are human beings. We are proud Palestinians. We sit around this table. We should be treated exactly like everybody else. Not to see what you want to see in the mirror and to ignore the obvious, the huge elephant in the room, the Palestinian people.
In other topic, China launched a space probe on its first ever mission to retrieve samples from an asteroid and return them to Earth for scientific research. This ambitious endeavor marks a significant milestone in Beijing's multi-billion-dollar space program, which is a key component of President Xi Jinping's vision for China's space dream. The mission aims to advance China's capabilities in deep space exploration and contribute valuable data to the global scientific community. The probe will travel millions of kilometers to reach the target asteroid, collect surface material, and safely bring the samples back to Earth. This mission follows China's recent successes in lunar exploration and demonstrates the country's growing ambitions to become a leading space power. And China has pledged to support Pacific Island countries in addressing climate change by implementing 100 small but impactful projects over the next 3 years. This commitment was announced by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi during the third China-Pacific Island countries foreign ministers meeting held in Xiamen. Projects will focus on areas such as clean energy, fisheries, ocean protection, low-carbon infrastructure, tourism, disaster prevention, and mitigation to help these vulnerable island nations enhance their climate resilience and sustainable development. The initiative aligns with China's broader Belt and Road strategy and its commitment to South-South cooperation, emphasizing fairness and equity in global climate governance. Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. So join us on our social medias, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.